everyone. Just doing a short video on Tartaria again because, I'm looking at my research and this stuff just keeps popping up that's quite frustrating to me. And, I'm just looking at this region of where Tartaria was and how there is no evidence in this main area of Tartaria of a great civilization. If we want to see where the great civilization is that they say is Tartarian, it's in Europe, northern Russia, all around the coast here of the Black Sea. These are all the places that they claim as the main Tartarian great empire, not Tartaria itself. So if we look at this article here, it's saying covert war between Russia and Khazarian Jewry. Now, I'm not going to say everything is correct in this article. I know that Putin has Khazarian genetics and he's possibly in on this whole World War III narrative. He might not be. I mean, not everything is designed, and within these groups there are factions that war with each other as well. But it's ironic that this Ukrainian business has happened at the time that it did, conveniently. But let's go on. It says the precursor to the ongoing covert hybrid World War III has its colourful beginnings in the kingdom of Khazaria, a Turkic empire which had its epicenter in what is now known as Ukraine. Khazaria was ruled by the evil king who had practiced Babylonian black arts, with the occult oligarchy serving at his court. So Khazarians become known to surrounding countries as thieves, murderers, road bandits, and for assuming the identities of those travelers they murdered as normal occupational practice and way of life. In 800 AD, the ultimatum is delivered by Russia, this is northern Russia, and other surrounding nations. The leaders of the surrounding nations, especially Russia, have had so many years of complaints by their citizens that, as a group, they deliver an ultimatum to the Khazarian king. They send a communique to the Khazarian king that he must choose one of the three Abrahamic religions for his people and make it his official state religion and require all Khazarian citizens to practice it and socialize all Khazarian children to practice that faith. The Khazarian king was given a choice between Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. As the story goes, the Khazarian king chose Judaism and promised to stay within the requirements laid out by the surrounding confederacy of nations led by the Russian Tsar. Despite his agreement and promise, the Khazarian king in his inner circle of oligarchs kept practicing ancient Babylonian black magic, also known as secret Satanism. Now, if you look into the origins of these people, they are more than likely came from the Hittites or the earlier Japhite tribes that moved out into this region after the flood. This secret Satanism involved occult ceremonies featuring child sacrifice after bleeding them out, drinking their blood, and eating their hearts. Gross, okay? And this comes from the Geopolitics, Hidden History of the Incredibly Evil Khazarian Mafia. As opposed to most people today, the remnants of Khazaria don't let bygones be bygones. They have been preparing for the big war. They have been infiltrating all of the institutions of the world. And this is important. They've been infiltrating all the institutions of the world. And that includes truth movement or the truth seekers on YouTube looking for answers to our history and what has been hidden from us. The deep dark secret of the occult ceremonies was that they were all based on ancient Babel worship, also known as worship of the owl. And I just want to show something about Tartaria. This is one of the flags of Tartaria, along with the griffin flag. It's the owl of Moloch. This is the symbolism of the occultists of Bohemian Grove. Weaving spiders come not here. Isn't this what they talk about in the ritual of Bohemian Grove? If you can go back and find that Alex Jones video when he broke into Bohemian Grove, Whether he broke in or he was allowed in, I'm not sure, but at the same time, this is a ritual to the Owl of Moloch. This is an image from that ritual in Bohemian Grove, where they burn an effigy of a child, whether it be an effigy or a real child. They pretend it's a fake. But these people don't hold back on their beliefs or their ceremonies. So I dare say it's a real child. Continuing on, in order to fool the Confederacy of Nations led by Russia that were watching Khazaria, the Khazarian king melded these Luciferian black magic practices with Judaism and created a secret satanic hybrid religion known as Babylonian Talmudism. Now, they didn't have to mold too much because the southern kingdom of Judah, along with the northern kingdom also, were all apostate. They had picked up these Babylonian traditions in Persia and Babylon themselves, and even way back to the Exodus from Egypt, they were carrying false god worship. I mean, this is the story of the Bible, God restoring his people and his people constantly worshipping the pagan or the Babylonian mystery gods of the mother, father, child cult. It says, this was made the national religion of Khazaria and nurtured the same evil that Khazaria was known for before. Sadly, the Khazarians continued their evil ways, robbing and murdering those from surrounding countries who travelled through Khazaria. Khazarian robbers often attempted to assume their identities after they murdered these visitors and became masters of disguise and false identities, a practice they have continued even to this very day, along with their child sacrifice, occult ceremonies which are actually ancient Baal worship. So it says the current conflict with the US and Russia is due to one simple reason: the Ashkenazi. They have a debt to settle with Russia. Allow us to forward it a bit of chronological tables as we delve into the nitty-gritty behind the conflict. The Ashkenazim are descendants of the Gentile Goy or Ashkenaz the Japhite, son of Japheth, where Gomer, Javan, sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz, Riphath, and Togarmah. Genesis 10:2-3. And I just want to remind everyone that this is not picking on specific people individually, but the Bible says it's Gog Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. So we're looking at an aristocratic rulership over these people who bring in this Gog Magog system. But these were the isles of the Gentiles divided in the land, Genesis 10:5. They are a resilient, roaming Turkic people. They have a knack for reinventing themselves. They first surfaced in world annals as the notoriously barbaric Scythians or Saccadians, depending on regional phonetic. Here, there is no Gentile or Judahite, circumcised or uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave or free, but Christ is all and is all in all, Colossians 3:11. The word Scythian or Saccadian comes from the word Saka, which is Iranian verbal root sak, meaning to roam. The Scythians settled central Eurasia, which they conquered with their gentle brother Togarmah and various other cousins, expanding across a vast tract of land and encompassed by, but was not limited to, parts of present-day Turkey and Iran. Their gentle brother Riphath, along with their uncle Javan, descendants settled in Greece. Later on, they reinvented themselves and settled a land they would call Khazaria, from the word Khazar, with its Turkic root Khaz, meaning to roam. Following the breakup of the Western Turkish steppe empire, then the country converted en masse to Judaism, Pharisaism, sometimes between 740 and 920 AD, just so they could remain independent of the two competing empires of the time, Christianity and Islam. Judaism was the most actively proselytizing religion. The most significant mass conversion occurred in the 8th century in the massive Khazar kingdom between the Black and Caspian Seas, explained Jewish historian Shlomo Sand. And we know that these Radhanite Jews on the Silk Road were the ones that brought Judaism to the Khazarian people. Then Sviatoslav I of Kyiv destroyed Khazaria around 1048 and absorbed it into Kievan Rus. a territory that would later become part of the Russian Empire. In Imperial Russia, the Ashkenazim were kept under tight control and enclosed in the Pale of Settlement, something the Ashkenazim never forgave Russia for. So is this what this image represents? The dragon Khazars of the City of London, the bankers, in 2012, in the Lord Mayor's festival, they had Gog and Magog with a bear chained. So is that them declaring that they tamed the Russian bear, or they have chained the Russians? So biding their time, they nurtured their hatred and plotted their revenge along with their new reinvention. They became the power behind the heinous Bolsheviks, who took over the Russian government in the 910s, killed 66 million Christians, including 200,000 members of the Christian clergy, and destroyed 40,000 churches. You must understand the leading Bolsheviks who took over Russia were not Russians. They hated Christians. Driven by ethnic hatred, they tortured and slaughtered millions of Russians without a shred of human remorse. It cannot be overstated, Bolshevism committed the greatest human slaughter of all time. The fact that most of the world is ignorant and uncaring about this enormous crime is proof that the global media is in the hands of the perpetrators, explained famed Christian Russian writer Alexander Solzhenitsyn. So here's a picture of Vladimir Putin meeting Alexander Solzhenitsyn. The great majority of these vicious Bolsheviks were Ashkenazi Jews such as Vladimir Lenin, Leon Trotsky, Lev Kamenev, Gregory Zinoviev, Yakov Sverdlov, and Grigory Solkonikov. They were financed by Ashkenazi bankers from New York and London, such as the Rothschild Bank, Jacob Schiff and Kuhn, and Leah and Co., who themselves championed the destructive ideology of the Ashkenazi Karl Marx and found it profitable to invest in communism, disastrous conquest of Russia, while making a few bucks in the process of plundering the country via well-placed agents who would later be known as oligarchs. Russia's entire Soviet empire collapsed in 1991, thus the Ashkenazim succeeded in bringing Russia to its knees. Revenge, round one done. We can see that these people have an agenda. They are the masters of disguise and lies and subverting history, replacing history. This is a map of the Roman Empire. So the grey is a Roman Empire at the end of Augustus's reign, AD 14. The dark green is Roman Empire at the end of Trajan's reign in AD 117. And if we look at this map, the Roman Empire extended all through Armenia, around the Black Sea, up to the north, through the Bosphorus, Kyiv, on the coast, all the way around up here to Thracia, which is modern-day Moldavia, and the Romanian area, which is possibly where the name Romanian comes from Romans, and it's north of Greece, Macedonia. So we can see the extent of the Roman Empire and the area in which it built its empire. It was the Greek historian Herodotus who gives us the historical description of the Scythians when he went on his travels around the Black Sea coastline in Asia Minor. And people like to dismiss all this history, and of course they have to dismiss all the European history because it flies in the face of the great Tartarian Empire. To me, it's obvious the great empire that has been destroyed, as we can see from the archaeological evidence and the massive amounts of soil accumulation that is inconsistent with time accumulation of topsoil. So these ancient Roman buildings that have been covered in meters of soil, even in the city of Rome itself. So this is what's being covered up, is this ancient kingdom or this ancient civilization was destroyed. And just as the Bible told us it would be destroyed via earthquakes and judgments, we didn't have this smooth timeline of what they're telling us. This is the lie and not that they're lying that we had a great Tartarian empire. So if we throw out all of our history and all of the historians and what they wrote, we have this nihilistic version of our history or where we came from, which means we have nothing. We have no foundation, we have no understanding and no truth to stand on of who we are and what we stand for. And then neuro-linguistically programming us to believe that this Khazarian empire, because the Khazarian empire is the Tartarian empire, was our history, that our great civilizations and possible lost technology was existent because of Tartaria. And this fits in perfectly with the European man should self-flagellate or bend the knee to the other cultures on earth, or feel guilty about the fact that the European nations built up these empires. And I don't want to keep going on a rant about Tartaria, but I think that the whole notion of this replacing European history with a Tartarian narrative is part of the removal of European people from history. And I think it's really important. Try looking up this lost history of the Great Tartaria in the wasteland that is now Tartaria, and you will find very little. All of the Tartarian buildings they claim are in this region where Rome ruled, where Europe ruled, and northern Russia. There are some cities, but as we know via the history, that the Russian kings pushed south and pushed the Khazarians out of their territories. So what's the motivation? Why would they want us to believe that we are part of this Tartarian empire? And why would they be writing right now, starting through the truth movement, a new history for humanity? And I believe it's this story here. Zelensky says, wants Ukraine to become a big Israel. So Ukraine, Tartaria, and these regions are being included into the modern state of Israel. We've heard that Benjamin Netanyahu talking about the Ashkenazi Jews from Israel going back to the Ukraine. And they're also establishing the old Silk Road trading belt with China called the Belt and Road Project. So if they go down this road, and they most certainly are going down this road, full steam ahead, within a generation or two, we will not have any more history but the great Tartarian history of Khazarian people. These dragon bankers, along with the Idumean converts who joined the Roman Empire, who converted these people and held the monopoly of trade on the Silk Road, which was lost to them, are now trying to re-establish their ancient kingdom of the state of Israel and the big Israel, or what used to be known as the Kingdom of Israel in the Ukrainian region. So don't fall for their bullshit again. We are getting a historical reset right now, and it's in the name of Tartaria. And I know a lot of people are making money off this subject and are probably highly unlikely to look at this critically. But it's really important for the future of people in general that these Tartarian Khazarians do not take hold of our future, creating a false past for our future generations. This is 1984 erasing history, 1984 erasing information. And before we know it, the books on history, the historians that we knew of, who are now all being declared fake, will actually be replaced with a fake version of our history. This building is from Romania, and its Romanesque architecture. Here is another Romanian building. Again, Greek and Roman pillars. Is this architecture Khazarian, Tartarian? They like to claim it as Tartarian. This architecture is not Tartarian. Gothic Roman, churches in the Ukraine. Another Roman building in the Ukraine. The Rus of Kyiv and the Varangians. So it says here the Varangian Guard of the Byzantine Empire gained brilliant renown. However, it is hard to tell when the term Varangian first came into use and to what extent it should be applied. Some authors think that the earliest mention comes from 911 AD, when the Kievan Rus and the Byzantine Emperor made a treaty. At that time, several hundred Rus warriors went to serve in Byzantium, though they did not yet form the famous Varangian Guard of the Emperors. Other scholars think that the Varangian Guard was first formed after Prince Vladimir, who escaped from Kievan Rus to Sweden around 977 AD, returned with thousands of mercenaries and conquered the capital city of Kyiv, now known as Kyiv in modern-day Ukraine. And in 988 AD, Vladimir sent 6,000 warriors to Byzantium to strengthen his alliance with the superpower. This marked the real beginning of the Varangian Guard, which lasted at least to the 13th century. So we've got all this archaeological findings of Scandinavian artifacts found in Kyiv. The presence of Nordic Scandinavians in what is now Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus is proven by more than 100 years of extensive archaeological excavations as well as contemporary DNA research. These early medieval Scandinavians were known as the Rus, and through military and economic might formed an elite ruling class over Eastern Slavic tribes centered in Kyiv in modern-day Ukraine. In this article, The Hidden History, Shift Banking Family Ukraine ruled by Khazarians and Roots of Russophobia. Meanwhile, the brutal Khazar domination over other people continued unchanged. But when a new factor appeared on the scene during the 8th century, they came coursing down the great rivers, the Dnieper, the Don, the Volga. They were the eastern branch of the Vikings. They were known as Varangians or as the Rus. Like other Vikings, the Rus were bold adventurers and fierce fighters, but when they tangled with the Khazars, the Rus often ended up paying tribute like everyone else. In the year 862, a Rus leader named Rurik founded the city of Novgorod, and the Russian nation was born. The Rus Viking settlements among the Slavonic tribes under Khazar domination and the struggle between Vikings and Khazars changed in character. It became a struggle by the emerging nation of Russia for independence from Khazar oppression. Over a century after the founding of Russia's first city, another momentous event took place. Russia's leader, Prince Vladimir of Kyiv, accepted baptism as a Christian. In the year 989, he actively promoted Christianity in Russia, and his memory is revered by Russians today as Saint Vladimir. And so 1,000 years ago, Russia's tradition as a Christian nation began. Vladimir's conversion also brought Russia into alliance with Byzantium. The Byzantine rulers had always feared the Khazars, and the Russians were still struggling to free themselves, and so in the year 1016, combined Russian and Byzantine forces attacked the Khazar kingdom. The Khazar Empire was shattered, and the kingdom of the Khazars itself fell into decline. Eventually, most of the Khazar Jews migrated to other areas. Many of them wound up in Eastern Europe, where they mingled and intermarried with the Jews like the Semitic Jews, the Radhanite Jews. Some 1,000 years earlier, the Khazar Jews became dispersed. The kingdoms of the Khazars was no more. They were cast into perdition. As they moved and lived among the Jewish people, the Khazar Jews passed on a distinct heritage from generations to generation. One element of the Khazar Jew heritage is a militant form of Zionism. In the view of the Khazar Jews, the land occupied by the ancient Israel is to be retaken, not by miracle, but by armed forces or jihad, crusade, religious war. This is what is meant by Zionism today. It's another word for crusade. It's another word for jihad, Zionism. And this is the force that created the nation which calls itself Israel today. The other major ingredient of Khazar Jews' heritage is hatred for Christianity. And for the Russian people as the champions of the Christian faith, Christianity is viewed as the force which caused the ancient so-called kingdom of the Jews, the Khazar kingdom, which was big Israel at that time, to collapse in Atil, the city of Atil. Having once dominated much of what is present-day Russia, the Khazar Jews still want to re-establish that domination and for millennium have been trying continually to do that. So what does that tell me? That tells me that they are willing to make up a fake history that is called Tartaria and replace our own history with that history. And, look into the mud floods, look into the destruction of these empires, and look into the prophecies about judgments. Yes, these things have happened, but this empire did not belong to the Tartarian or what incorporated the Khazarian Empire. So for those of you who think that the millennial reign was actually the realm of Tartaria, why would Jesus name his kingdom after a place referred to as hell? We have word etymology here. This is Tartar, as in Tartar, implied in Tartary, the land of the Tartars, from medieval Latin Tartarus. From Persian Tartar, first used 13th century, in reference to the hordes of Genghis Khan, said to be ultimately from Tartar, a name of the Mongols for themselves, from the European language probably influenced by Latin Tartarus, hell. In the present danger of the Tartars, either we shall push them back into Tartarus, whence they come, or they will bring us all into heaven. And when he says heaven, I think he means death. The historical word for now are called the ethnological works of Tartars. The Turkic people, their native region was east of the Caspian Sea. Genghis' horde was a mix of Tartars, Mongols, Turks, etc., used figuratively for savage, rough, irascible person. Among the adjectival forms that have been used are Tartarian, Tartarus, Tartarian. Now, Genghis Khan and the Mongols are the kings referred to in Revelation of the East. This word in Greek goes way back before the Tartarian Empire, and it's 5020 Tartaru. In the Greek, to cast into hell, I thrust down to Tartarus or Gehenna. Tartaru, properly send to Tartarus. The New Testament uses Tartaru for the netherworld, a place of punishment fit only for demons. Later, Tartarus came to represent eternal punishment for wicked people. Now, why would God's millennial kingdom be named after a place of punishment, banishment, or hell? The Greek word is far older than all of the other origins of the word. Now, I can see how European people have named the Tartars or the Mongols after a place that might seem to them to be hell. But the point of the matter is that if this kingdom was the millennial reign kingdom, then there is no way that the king of that kingdom is going to name his kingdom after a place referred to in Greek as hell. And that's my rant done for today. It just keeps popping up. I can't but help see the connection between destroying the European peoples and nations to destroying their history and this 1984 style erasing of history in total. We can see with this Zelensky's Big Israel and their plans of an establishment of the Belt and Road system along the Central Asian countries all the way through to Europe. Even in Australia here, they are involved in the Belt and Road project. And this will be our future. This will be how our new world order system, as Henry Kissinger has put it, will run. This is what it will look like, and future generations will probably never know about us. Only the great Tartarian empire that has run for eternity. That's if we let them get away with it. Thanks again, and see you next time.